Ukraine and Russia have launched their biggest drone attacks against each other since the start of the war. Our correspondent James Waterhouse joins us now from Kiev. Tell us what happened overnight, James.
Well, there are a lot of drones in the sky, to put it mildly. You know, since Russia started targeting cities in this way with these drones since 2022, last night was a record. More than 145 were reportedly launched at cities and regions right across Ukraine. Here in Kiev in the centre, the eastern Donetsk region, Kharkiv in the northeast. The list goes on. It really was a sizable attack. Where mostly Iranian-made Shahed drones were used. They have a distinctive wingspan, a propeller engine, and quite a nasty warhead on the front, packed with explosives typically. And they are designed, broadly speaking, to terrorise populations. They're not usually used to hit military targets in that sense, but they fly over. You can hear the sound of the engines. You can also hear air defences as well. And to be honest, this is a record night which follows a record month. In October, more than 2,000 drones like this were launched across Ukraine. Sirens go almost every night, and people have disturbed night's sleep. But this was also a night when Ukraine launched its own drone attack on Russia. You have the mayor of Moscow saying more than 30 were intercepted on their way to the city. It caused 2 international airports to be closed. There's footage of these unmanned Ukrainian drones, which are manufactured here in Ukraine, flying overhead in Russia. And there are also more than 30 Ukrainian drones reportedly intercepted in western Russia on targets close to the border with Ukraine. We've got the military here saying that they successfully hit an ammunition depot. So it really has been an eventful night in the skies, and this always goes in tandem with the fighting on the ground. We're still seeing fierce battles in the east where Russia is inching forward, but still Moscow is able to wage these aerial campaigns, and Ukraine tries to hit back where it can.
Does this represent an escalation in the conflict overall, though?
I think this is a par for the course, but especially so. Let's put it like that. I think it is clear, because these Shahed drones are relatively cheap, costing tens of thousands of pounds compared to millions with a missile, Russia is able to sustain these kinds of attack. It is true that Russia is advancing on multiple parts of the front line. It clearly is trying to take as much of Ukraine as possible, not least with the US presidential election outcome, not least with uncertain political times ahead on whether there will be some kind of negotiation. But clearly Russia is going for it, and it is escalating in a sense that it is leaning on North Korea more. We're seeing the geopolitical footprint of this war enlarged too. So perhaps an escalation, but in a war of attrition, it's about who loses first. And at the moment, it is Ukraine very much on the receiving end of this relentless invasion, attacks from the sky, and it's looking to get any kind of leg up where it can.
James, thank you very much. James Waterhouse in Kiev. Well, the latest Russian and Ukrainian drone strikes come as the head of the UK Armed Forces says that Russia has suffered its worst month of losses since the start of the war in Ukraine. The Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, said an average of 1,500 Russian soldiers were killed or wounded every day in October. He added that Russia had now lost more than 700,000 troops in the war and was spending more than 40% of public expenditure on defence and security. He's been speaking to Laura Kuensberg.
Russia is paying an extraordinary price for Putin's illegal invasion. So October was the worst casualty figures for Russia so far. On average, over 1,500 people either killed or wounded every single day.
Every day? Every
single day. And that is for tiny increments of land. There is no doubt that Russia is making tactical territorial gains, and that is putting a pressure on Ukraine, because Ukraine is having to put more people to the front line, and Ukraine is also under pressure from the airborne attacks and the long-range missiles that are impacting on their energy infrastructure, which again hits the morale of the nation. But at the higher level, you then need to come back to Russia. Russia is spending over 40% of its public expenditure now on defence and security. That's more than it spends on education and health combined. that's an enormous drain on Russia as a country.
And yet, from the outside, looking at this, it looks like there is a horrific stalemate going on, where on both sides there are dreadful losses, innocent civilians being caught up in a war, and there is no sign of any breakthrough. But are you suggesting that Putin can't sustain this?
So I'm saying that the longer the war goes on for Russia, the more difficult it is. Russian economy is under pressure. It will be okay this year. It can survive next year. As you look through next year and into 2026, the Russian economy is under more and more pressure. And the Western approach has been to be really clear that Western countries will maintain their support to Ukraine and to do that for as long as it takes. And that's the message that President Putin has to absorb, and that's the reassurance for President Zelensky.
Chief of the UK Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin.